Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. Thank you for joining me today as I look ahead to 2024 and go through my reading plan for the year. So I've had some pretty good success with these in the last couple of years. I set myself a reading plan in 2022 and 2023. Both of those had somewhere in the region of 30 to 35 books on them, depending on how you counted the series. And I did manage to read most of the books on both of those lists. Now with my 2024 plan, I've got a slightly different style. I've got fewer categories, fewer books in those categories potentially, and I've got myself a bit of a surprise in there as well. So let's go and find out how that all looks. So I've got 6 categories that I'm going to go through for my reading plan. I've got 5 books in each, giving me a total of 30. Some of these are a first book in a series, or it's a continuation of a series, and there are more than one books that I have to read in those, but I'm only going to count the initial book or the next book depending on circumstance. So I'm going to call that 30 books, although it could obviously lead to more than that. So the 6 categories that I have this year, and very brief details on them, although most of them are self-explanatory. I've got continuations of series, so I've already started the series and I'm planning to read the next book. I've got new series that I want to start, so book 1 in a series that I've been looking to get to for a while and haven't yet had the opportunity to. I've then got kind of a similar category, but this one is for older titles. So book 1 in a series, but the publication year for each of these starts with a 19 instead of a 20. I've then got 5 self-published books that I want to get to this year, and also 5 science fiction books. And then for the 6th category I've got, it's kind of a lucky dip because I'm going to be going in to my TBR jar and picking out 5 of those as well. So a couple of things that I'm not going to do as part of this run through of my 2024 reading plan. One, I'm not going to get all of the books off my shelves and show you the physical copies that I do have. I've got, I think of the 30, or I think of the 25 that I know at this moment, I've got 19 of them, so I'm not going to go and strip my shelves bare and have a big pile of books around me. I'll just put digital copies on the screen here instead. I'm also not going to go through too much about what the books are about, so I'm not going to look into the synopsis of any of these books. Many of them I don't actually know. I'll go into them relatively blind. I just know that I've been looking forward to these books for a while and I'm in for a surprise when I get to them. So let's start off with the continuations, and these are all going to be the second book in a series. I may continue on and read book 3 and 4 and so forth in these series, but for the purposes of my reading plan, I'm only listing book 2 in the series. So the first of these is Unbound by Michael R. Miller. This is book 2 of the Songs of Chaos. So I read Ascendant a couple of months ago and I quite enjoyed it, so I'm really eager to get back into this one. I've got 2 really chunky hardcovers here for book 2 and book 3, so it'll be good to be able to get to these. I think it's maybe a 5-book series, and book 4 is currently in the works, so maybe by the time I finish book 3, book 4 will also be ready for me. Next I've got The Forbidden Realms by H.C. Newell. This is book 2 in Fallen Light. Again, book 1 wasn't too long ago for me. I read Curse of the Fallen and once more had a really good time for it. That's why it's on the list for me to continue, because I'm really looking forward to it. Again, with this one, I've got the 2nd and the 3rd book ready and waiting, and the 4th book is currently in the works as well. In addition, for this one, there is a novella, and I think there might be another novella on the way, I'm not entirely sure, but there is a novella currently available for me to expand my knowledge of this world as well. I've then got Sister of the Dead, which is book 2 of Vaishivka by E.C. Greaves. I read Daughter of the Beast in, I think it was August. It was the first book that I read for my allocation for SPFB 09. Really enjoyed it, and I was quite sad in a way because on my Discord a few people were having a buddy read of the series and I left it there whilst they carried on and read book 2 and 3 because I'd read it for a commitment for SPFBO and I didn't want to show any favouritism by continuing the series straight away until my SPFBO commitments were over. That's all out of the way now, so I'm looking forward to getting back into this series and seeing what happens next. I've then got Rise Red Kingdom, which is book 2 in the Burn Red Skies series by Kirsten Espinosa Rosero. I did think this was a duology, but I've spoken to the author and I believe there is a 3rd book in the works. No idea when it's going to be released, but it is a continuation of a series for now, rather than a finished book, a final book in a series. But I am looking forward to get into this one. There were some really cool dragons and airships in that series, and I want to find out what happens next. This next one also has some cool dragons and airships. This is Palom from the World of Lunaria by L.L. McRae. Again, it wasn't too long ago that I read Marauder, which is book 1 in this series. Had a great time with it, learning some new characters and some new magic, and I love the world that's been created here, so I'm looking forward to exploring some more. So then I've got my 5 new series to try. So these are a mix of traditional and self-published titles that I have, for the most part, been on my shelves or my Kindle for a little while, waiting for me to get to them. I'm going to start off with the Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu. This is starting off with The Grace of Kings. Now, I've heard a lot about this one. It's one of the biggest series, I suppose, in terms of current popularity that I've got on my list here. I'm not sure exactly what to look for in this series. I'm not sure exactly what to expect, but I'll hopefully be finding out relatively soon. Then I've got Mages of the Wheel by J.D. Evans. This one starts off with Reign and Ruin. There's a few more books in this series, I think, than some of the others that I've got on my list. I think there are maybe 5 and there's at least 1 novella, but I could be wrong in that one. This one I'm maybe a little bit dubious about in terms of how I'm going to enjoy it, whether it's really going to be for me or not. There may be a bit more romance than I'm normally used to, but I've got a friend who's recently read it, loved the series, and I'm going into it on a high recommendation as a result. This one did win SPFBO 7, so it's got good pedigree, but that doesn't mean to say that it's going to be for my taste. I'll find out that at some point next year. Another title from the SPFBO 7 final is next, actually. This is Brotherhood of the Eagle by Tim Hardy, starting off with Hall of Bones. Now, I recently had my first experience of Tim Hardy's writing when I read his story for The Advent of Winter. Really enjoyed it, and it's set in the same world, so that gave me a bit of exposure, I guess, to this series. I have already read the first chapter of Hall of Bones for a first chapter reads video, so now is my opportunity to get back into it and read the rest of the book as well. Then I've got an author I'm very familiar with. This is the Firemane Saga by Raymond D. Feist, starting off with King of Ashes. So I loved the Riftworld cycle, the overall 30-odd book series, or series of series. I read those books over a number of years. They did kind of tail off for me in terms of my enjoyment towards the end of the series, so I'm really excited to see where this one lands as a new series and a new world, new characters, magic, I assume magic anyway, and all of those things. So yeah, really looking forward to this one as an author I'm very familiar with and have previously really enjoyed. And then the last one is another one that I'm not sure kind of how it's going to land for me. This one is Empires of Dust by Anna Smith Spark, starting off with the Court of Broken Knives. Now, I have heard that this one has maybe some quite flowery language, and that may not work for me. So that's the reason I'm going into this one with maybe a little bit of trepidation. But I have heard that the author's books are really good if you do get into them. So fingers crossed this is one that's going to work for me. Then my next category is my older titles. So with these ones, as I said, each of the titles was released at a year starting 19 rather than 20. I kind of refer to the 80s, 90s of fantasy as being the classics. It's kind of the modern classics maybe, I guess, but it's an era of fantasy writing that I have absolutely loved. Of course, I grew up reading those books for the most part, so there's definitely a feeling of nostalgia with that as well. And I wanted to go back and read some of those titles that for whatever reason I just never got to. So some of these I very nearly have picked up at various points. In particular this first one, which was released in 1987. It's Daughter of the Empire, book 1 of the Empire trilogy by Raymond D. Feist and Janny Wirtz. So as I just mentioned, I really had a good time overall with the Rift War cycle. I did try to read Daughter of the Empire around the kind of the start of that period, because that's where it fits in the world chronology of the series, because it is linked to the Rift War cycle. But it was very different. I don't think I was ready for the tonal shift, because it's quite a political fantasy, and I didn't get into it and ended up putting it down very quickly. My tastes have changed now. I've moved on, I've evolved, and I would say matured in my reading tastes as well. So I'm hoping that now is the right time. A lot of people have been trying to get me to read this for a long time, so fingers crossed I'm going to get to this one in 2024 and I'm going to enjoy it. Then from 1972 I've got Elric of Melniboné, which is the first book of the Elric saga by Michael Moorcock. This is one of those that I really know very little about, except that he's a very classic character, is Elric. He's very well known. He's up there with Dross and Drizzt as some of the most famous classic fantasy characters. I'm very familiar with those two I just mentioned, but I've never got round to Elric, so I've added him to the list and I'm going to try him out. I then have Jereg by Stephen Brust. This one was released in 1983 and it's the first book in the Vlad Teltosh series. I'm probably going to at various points just call that Teltos, but I might listen to the audio of this one, which, if anything, if it's mentioned enough, will stick Teltosh as the pronunciation in my head. Again, this is one that I haven't really heard much about. I've got one friend who has read these books and has rather enjoyed them, so I'm hoping that I'm going to follow on with Nikki, the obsessive bookseller, and really enjoy these ones. This is kind of one that's been on my radar for a while, just through various mentions that I've seen on Reddit, and I don't think I've seen it anywhere else other than Nikki's channel, so fingers crossed this is going to be one I'm going to enjoy. There are a lot of books in this series, so if I do like them, I think they are shorter books overall, as were a lot of the kind of fantasies of the 80s and 90s, but yeah, we'll see how we go with these, and there's plenty more to come if I do get into it. I've then got The Black Company by Glenn Cook. This is the first book in the series of the same name. Came out a year after Jereg did. This one was 1984. Again, this is one that I don't know too much about, except that it's kind of known as one of the early kind of forefathers of grimdark, so hopefully it's going to be one again that's going to work for me, because there are, once more, quite a few titles in this one if I do get into it. I've heard a few people who have tried this one and bounced off it. As far as I'm aware, I'm not actually close to anyone who has really read it, and certainly that has continued through the series, so sort of enjoyed them, but I'm hoping that I'm going to be one of those people. And then the most recent of the titles in this category is Curse of the Mistwraith by Jenny Wirtz. This one is book one of the Wars of Light and Shadow. Many years ago I did get one of the books from a book club I was in. That turned out to be from later on in this series, so it's just been sitting on my shelves and in book boxes waiting for me to get to it. I've heard a lot of good things recently about the Wars of Light and Shadow, so I'm hoping that it's one that I'm going to enjoy. I've got the first 3 books essentially, so plenty for me to move on to if I do enjoy this one. As I say, it's the most recent of the series that I've got in this category, with Curse of the Mistwraith coming out first in 1993. Okay, so moving on to my self-pub list, and again I'm just talking about book one in the series, although several of these do have a series, so there are further books ready for me to get to if I do enjoy them and if I want to continue. As far as the actual reading plan goes though, it's just the 5 initial books. So I'm going to start off with The Blood of Crows by Alex Pearce. This one I believe is a standalone, or at least it is at the moment. Whether there'll be more in the series later on, I don't know. But I've been looking forward to this one for quite a while, because I do like a good fantasy heist, and that's what I'm expecting from what I've heard of this book. Then I've got an SPF B09 semi-finalist, I think it was. This is Death's Disciple by Emma L. Adams. I've got a review copy on my shelf that I've had for a little while. I put it off at first because I wanted to get my own SPF B09 commitments out of the way. So now again, that's done, so it's time for me to be able to get to this one. Another one I've had on my shelf for a long time now is a book that I actually won in a giveaway. This is King's Radiance, book one of The Bonds of Kin, I think it is, by Luke Schultz. The second book in this series has recently come out, and I'm looking forward to it. I've heard some really good things, although I don't really know anything about the actual premise of the book, but I am definitely looking forward to finding out, hopefully enjoying it, and being able to move on to that second book. Another one that I have read the first chapter of in one of my sample videos where I read the first chapter of a series of books is Dream of Death City by PJ Nwosu. This one is a Red Kingdom novel. I'm not sure if it's specifically book one, but it's certainly in publication order, the first book. There is again a novella with this one that I can get to as well if I want to. When I did read that opening chapter, I was very intrigued. It's definitely one that I wanted to continue with, so that's why I've added it to my 2024 plan. And then I've got Demon's Reign by Bengali and David Estes. This one is book one of the Bloodwood saga. This is another one that I've received from the author and I've just not got round to as yet. It looks great. It's one that I was very interested in reading but just didn't get the opportunity to. I have had some good experience with Bengali's writing, and I've not actually tried David Estes yet, although I do have on my shelf Kingfall, which is another book that I do want to get to at some point. It is a very long one, so maybe that's why I've not got around to it just as yet, but it is one of the titles that's in my TBR jar. I am looking forward to Demon's Reign though, and that will give me presumably my first taste of David's writing, even though it is in partnership in this instance with another author. Then I've got my sci-fi category, and this one is in many ways the most solid of my categories because I think 3 of the titles that I've got in here I've already scheduled in specific months to read them because I'm going to be doing buddy reads for them. So first of these is Alien Clay. I haven't scheduled this one in for a buddy read, although I'm sure we are going to be doing it because I've got a number of people on my Discord who are really looking forward to this, and several of those have already got review copies like I have. So this one is a standalone, I believe, by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I love Adrian's work. I've read many of his books over various different series, and this one I've heard some really good things about from people who were at FantasyCon, I think it was, where he read the opening chapter. So it does sound really good. I'm really excited for it, and it's going in my plan for early in 2024. Another one, this one's kind of a repeat appearance. It's been on at least one, maybe both of my previous year's reading plans, but it's Shards of Earth, again by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is book one of the Final Architecture. I was planning to read it towards the tail end of this year, but the buddy reads that I'm doing, the sci-fi buddy reads I'm doing with my friend Nina, we kind of planned it in and we're going to read it in January 2024 instead. So I did bump it slightly, but it is firmly set now. It's actually got a scheduled month that I'm going to be reading this one, and the plan is for us to hopefully like it because we want to move on to book 2 and book 3 in the following 2 months as well. And then the third one that I've got set up, I think this one is starting in April after we finish the Final Architecture, but Nina and I are doing a Sunny to read along as well. So we're going to be starting off with book 1 as a good place to start a series, which is Empire of Silence, and the author of this one is Christopher Rocchio. Again, this is one that I've heard a lot of people reading, a lot of people enjoying, so fingers crossed Nina and I are going to be among that number when we get round to this one. Then I've got another book that's been on my shelf for quite a while and I've just never had the opportunity to get to, so I've put it on my list to make next year the year, and this one is book 1 of The Graven by Essa Hansen, and it's Nofek gloss. Again, this is one that I really know very little about, but I have heard some good things from some friends who've read it, so once more, fingers crossed, I'm going to enjoy it and be able to move on at some point to continue the series. And then the last one in the sci-fi category is by Kate Elliott. This one is Unconquerable Sun, book 1 of the Sun Chronicles. So again, I don't really know much about this one. I think it might have been this series that I heard was kind of based loosely on the story of Alexander the Great. I could be misremembering that, and it could be a completely different series, but either way, I've read Kate Elliott before. I've read some of her fantasy. I think it was the Crossroads series, and it was many years ago, but I did quite enjoy that trilogy, so I am familiar with her writing, and hopefully I'm going to enjoy this series as well. So then the last category I've got is the surprise one for me. I've called it my TBR Jar Lucky Dip. Hopefully it is going to be lucky for me, but we will find out in a moment. Now, I do go through this jar every so often and just pull out titles that I've already read, but I've added to my list from my written TBR. I've got a spreadsheet TBR rather than from picking out of a jar. So fingers crossed there's no duplicates in here that I've already mentioned on my list, but if there is, I'll just of course pick out a replacement title. So I'm going to pick out 5 in a row rather than go through them individually. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to start off with In Solitude's Shadow. This one is, I'm not sure what the series title is, but this one is by David Green, I believe. I do have a physical copy of that I was gifted by the publisher, and it's one that I've not had a chance to get to so far. It is quite a short one, so that's quite a lucky dip, I suppose. Then I've got an SBFBO 9 title, The Awakening Fire. This one is by Cassidy Faline. I've got a few friends who've read this one and really enjoyed it. It is I think it's kind of a science fantasy, but I'm not entirely sure. But I have read the opening chapter of this one as one of my first chapter reads videos, and I did quite enjoy it, so fingers crossed I'll enjoy the rest of the book as well. Then we have Rise of the Mages by Scott Drakeford. I think this one's just recently had an audiobook released, so I might give that one a try. But this was a gift from my friend Covers with Cassidy for, I think it was my birthday last year, or maybe it was Christmas, but I haven't got around to it yet. Next year, I'm planning to. 4th in my lucky dip, I have Curse of the Mistwraith. So 4th in my lucky dip, I've got Hall of Bones, so I'll get 2 replacements. Obviously I didn't go through and sort those out. So first up we have Starbinder. This one is by Mark Timoney. I'm looking forward to this one, but I am going to dump this one. Or in fact, no, I won't dump it. I will add it as a 6th one, because this one is only a novella. So I am looking for full titles in here, although I didn't stipulate that. I will pick out a 6th one as well. And I've got King of Ashes, so that's another one. This is where the planning looks really good. On the plus side, it's reducing the titles that I've got in my TBR jar. I've got Exile next. This one is by AJ Kelvin. I'm not sure of the series name, but there are a few titles that are available, I think, in this one. And with that, it is again quite a short one, so that's a pretty good one for me to be picking out. And then the last one I've got is Petition. Again, I don't know what the series name is. This is by Delilah Wan and was again a semi-finalist in SBFBO 9. I was really happy to have got hold of a copy of the hardback of this one, because apparently they're quite difficult to get hold of. I think I got the last one on Amazon at the time, but it's one that I've heard some really good things about and I'm looking forward to get into. So there we go. Although it didn't look very well planned, I'm quite happy with what I pulled out of my TBR jar. I just need to add those titles to my list. So I've ended up with 31, because I will add the novella Starbinder in there as well. And yeah, I'm hoping that it's going to be a really good year, that I have good success with, both in terms of completing many of the titles on here, ticking off many of the books that I've gone through today, but also importantly enjoying those books as well. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of my reading plan. What do you think I'm going to enjoy? Are there any of these that you've read and you want to tell me your thoughts about? Also, what are you planning to read next year as well? That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this run through my 2024 reading plans. I'll hopefully see you in the next video sometime soon. Until then, as always, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.